Hello, everyone. I'm Rick, a 29-year-old guy, and my ex-girlfriend is Taylor, a 27-year-old woman. We were together for 3 years, and right on the brink of getting married, I stumbled upon a shocking revelation. I initially met Taylor when we both applied for a job at the same organization. While waiting for our interviews, we struck up a conversation, and before we left, we exchanged contact information. At that time, I had high hopes of landing the job due to my qualifications. Unfortunately, I didn't make the cut, but Taylor did. Despite my setback, we continued to stay in touch, and she generously shared interview leads and tips, which eventually helped her secure a position. Fortunately, a few months later, I also found a job, and our friendship deepened. Beyond our shared career path, what drew me to Taylor were her sharp conversations, great sense of humor, and her vibrant energy. When I first met her, I had no intentions of falling in love. It simply happened. I initially asked for her number because I thought she'd make a witty addition to my circle of friends. Specifically, we exchanged numbers to keep each other informed about job updates. As time passed and we grew closer, our friendship evolved into a romantic relationship, and we dated for nearly 3 years. However, it was during this time that I uncovered something that ultimately led to the downfall of our relationship. During the time we were dating, Taylor and I shared a living space for a year. However, after that first year, she expressed her desire to move back in with her best friend. Her reasoning was that since we'd eventually live together after getting married, she wanted to enjoy her single life with her best friend. I didn't see any issue with it and was happy to give her the space she wanted. She'd visit me on weekends and occasionally stay over, effectively dividing her time between my place and her best friend's. She maintained this back-and-forth routine. We were a strong and impressive couple, and even without openly declaring our relationship, it was evident to people based on our behavior when we went out together. I had previously been in a committed relationship that ended poorly, leading me to decide to take a break from romance. However, everything changed when I met Taylor. Throughout our relationship, I wholeheartedly supported her in all her endeavors. I encouraged her to pursue courses, work diligently, and invested my all into her. By the second year of our relationship, I was certain she was the woman I would marry because she checked all the right boxes. She knew how to care for and love me, and she handled various aspects of our relationship admirably. During our first year living together, we split expenses and responsibilities equally. However, once she began shifting between my house and her best friend's, the arrangement of sharing bills came to a halt. During our special occasions like anniversaries and her birthdays, I gave her gifts I knew she'd love just to make her happy. Honestly, she was my top priority all the time. I made sacrifices and did everything I could to maintain our happy relationship. I wasn't doing this out of desperation to be with her, but because I deeply valued our relationship and wanted it to be full of peace and happiness. I have a vivid memory of this. Before Taylor began swapping houses with our best friend one night, while watching a movie, she suddenly asked me a strange question. She wanted to know my thoughts on open relationships. I jokingly said that people in open relationships might not be in love with each other, and we both laughed. She got offended and tried to argue against my statement. She went on to tell me about many couples in open relationships who loved each other deeply. She accused me of being old-fashioned, but I didn't take it seriously and changed the subject. On another occasion, while we were having dinner together, she brought up the idea of us having an open relationship. At first, I thought she was teasing me, but when I saw her serious expression, I realized she was sincere. Right then and there, I rejected the idea of having an open relationship and told her I'd rather stay single than go down that path. After that day, she never brought it up again, and I didn't dwell on it either. Before our relationship even began, I told Taylor that the one thing I couldn't stand in a relationship was a partner who cheated or lied. I made it clear that I wouldn't forgive her if she ever cheated on me. I kept repeating this because of the pain I had experienced in my previous relationship. I didn't want to give my heart to her only for it to be broken by infidelity. So, I was determined to do my part to ensure our relationship remained strong. After Taylor moved out, I noticed a change in her behavior. It started with her frequently canceling our dates. We had a tradition of going out every Friday evening, whether it was for a casual walk in the park, grabbing food from a truck, or dining at a nice restaurant. Since she no longer lived with me, the plan was for her to come to my place and we'd go out together. However, she began making me wait for hours. When I called her, she either didn't answer or asked to reschedule because of supposed urgent matters. Sometimes she would cancel just minutes before we were supposed to meet, claiming she thought she had informed me earlier. Looking back, I should have realized something was amiss, but I believed all her explanations. I even encouraged her to work less since most of her excuses seemed to revolve around her job. Despite the frustration of her frequent cancellations, I didn't take it to heart because I considered myself the understanding boyfriend. A year after she moved out, Taylor and I grew distant, even though we lived in the same town. It felt like we were in a long-distance relationship because she had received a promotion at work, which consumed more of her time. She started traveling frequently with her team, and our face-to-face meetings became rare when she was in town. Our primary means of communication became WhatsApp messages. Sometimes, I sent her messages that went unread as she continued to update her WhatsApp status. When things became unbearable, I reached out to her best friend, but it didn't lead to any changes. Later, I had a conversation with Taylor about our fading relationship. She attributed it to her demanding work schedule, which struck me as odd because her job shouldn't have required so much time. Even freelancers managing multiple clients seemed to have more free time than Taylor. After our talk, Taylor promised to make improvements, and she did for 2 months. She called more frequently, responded promptly to my messages, and kept me informed about her daily life. She even resumed spending weekends at my place after a long absence. Her changes brought happiness, and I began to feel like we were getting back on track. I didn't want to hinder her progress, so I refrained from suggesting she find a new job. Instead, we worked out ways to manage her busy schedule. At this point, I believed it was time to take a significant step. Taylor had never mentioned marriage, and I assumed she wanted me to broach the subject as the man. So I purchased an expensive engagement ring and planned to propose the next time she visited for the weekend. On that particular weekend, when she arrived on Friday as she usually did, we decided to dine at an upscale restaurant, and I brought the engagement ring with me. However, something inside me prevented me from proposing to her there as I had planned. Later that night, when we returned home, she dozed off in the middle of our Friday movie night. I could tell she was exhausted because she had been complaining about tiredness since she arrived at my place. Out of love, I guided her to the bedroom and tucked her into bed. When I returned to continue watching the movie we had started, I noticed her phone was lodged in the old couch cushions, so I retrieved it for her. While I watched the movie, I contemplated checking her phone, but I resisted the urge. In the early stages of our relationship, we used to freely access each other's phones because we had nothing to hide. After some internal debate, I decided to grab her phone, but it required her fingerprint for access. To be honest, I was too lazy to go back to the bedroom to get her fingerprint, and I was making an effort not to be overly nosy. However, my curiosity got the best of me, and when I finally unlocked her phone using her fingerprint, I was taken aback by what I discovered. My initial destination was her call log. Aside from our conversations and those with her best friend, I wanted to see if she was regularly in contact with someone else. My search didn't get far because I came across a contact labeled as Daddy. This was perplexing because her father had passed away, and she wasn't particularly close to any other older family members except her mom. I was sure it wasn't my number either, as my contact was saved with my name just above it. She had exchanged calls with this Daddy 3 times during the day and shortly before arriving at my apartment that evening. Driven by curiosity, I checked her WhatsApp to find this contact, and there it was, right at the top of her messages. She had unread messages from Daddy because she had fallen asleep. When I opened these messages, I realized they had been communicating throughout the evening, even while we were at the restaurant. At first glance, I could tell something was off about their chat because of the emojis they used. So, I decided to go through their entire conversation from the beginning. To my shock, I discovered that Taylor was in a relationship with her boss while we were still together. According to what I read, she told her boss that she was in an open relationship with me until we got married. Their conversation went back a long way, and I got chills when I realized their relationship had started around the same time she began asking questions about open relationships. That's not all. Taylor had undergone an abortion for him once, and she received significant compensation, including a promotion at work. I was devastated and wished I could unsee everything I had read. What made it even more painful was that they mentioned me in some of their conversations and said all sorts of things about me. As I continued reading, I learned that it was her daddy who had suggested she spend weekends with me. She didn't want to do it on her own. He asked her to do it to prevent me from feeling jealous that someone else was taking up more of her time. After a lot of persuasion from him, she reluctantly agreed. He also mentioned that he wanted her to stay busy with me so that he could have more time for his own family. He explained that his family had been complaining about his absence, and his wife was starting to suspect he was cheating, which he wanted to avoid. It all seemed incredibly absurd to me, and it hurt to discover that the calls, messages, and updates weren't genuinely from Taylor. That night, I sat on the couch, unsure of what to do. I considered various ways of confronting and exposing her at that moment. I even thought about waking her up with a bucket of cold water and demanding an explanation. But I knew I had anger issues, and that approach would likely lead to physical assault and legal trouble. So, I decided to take a walk to clear my head and think more rationally. Before leaving the house, I exported their entire chat and sent it to myself, then marked the last messages as unread. After walking for hours without a specific destination, I came up with an idea similar to something I had read on Reddit. It was challenging to pull off, but I managed it. Throughout the entire weekend, I pretended as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until she left on Sunday evening that... The next week, I visited Taylor's workplace on a Tuesday, and because it was a corporate setting, I had to wait. During my wait, I distributed printed copies of the conversation between Taylor and her boss to everyone I encountered, including the receptionist. By the time Taylor finally came to meet me, a lot of people had these copies, and they were in utter shock. One guy in her office immediately exclaimed, "I knew it, I knew it. I kept telling you all that something fishy was going on, but you said I was just talking too much." Taylor was completely bewildered, and when she asked what was happening, I handed her a copy. As soon as she glanced at it, she threw the copy aside and attempted to grab me. With what I had done, I knew the news would reach the HR department, potentially jeopardizing her job. I enjoyed the way everyone stared at her as I left the room, and as she chased after me. Just as I was about to get into my car and drive away, she caught up, held onto my arm, and said she could explain. When I got home, she rushed out of a taxi without shoes and came to plead with me. She kept banging on my door, which drew the attention of my neighbors. Though it was frustrating, I used the opportunity to toss out the few things she had left at my place through the window and told her to go be with her daddy. She still refused to leave, and an hour later, her best friend arrived. Her best friend attempted to talk to me from outside, but when I didn't respond, she gathered up the items I'd thrown out and drove Taylor away in her car. Since then, Taylor has been incessantly texting and reaching out to all my friends, trying to convince me to take her back. It's quite bold of her to think we could ever be together after everything she's done. As of now, the situation is this. Despite all her actions, I still have feelings for her. However, I don't want to be in a relationship with her anymore. I've been attempting to heal and move forward, but she's been pleading with me to meet and talk. It may sound foolish, but I've arranged to meet with her next week, and I'm unsure about what to do. I can't shake off the memories we created in my apartment. Nearly everything there reminds me of her. My heart yearns for her, but being in a relationship with her would be harmful to me. Update 1. 2 days ago, Taylor and I had our scheduled meeting. As soon as she saw me, she burst into tears and caused a scene. I felt quite embarrassed because we were in a public park, and I tried to maintain composure as if everything was normal. After we settled down, she admitted that she had never believed in monogamy right from the beginning. She assumed I'd be the type of guy who'd be open to an open relationship as our relationship evolved. However, when she proposed the idea, and I firmly rejected it, she felt let down and decided to do her own thing. It's rather amusing that she believed I'd never discover her affair. She even confessed that she never intended to tell me, and planned to stop once I proposed or we got married. But her words didn't align with what I had uncovered from her WhatsApp messages. When I confronted her about the termination, she began sobbing and apologizing. She admitted that the pregnancy was mine, but she was desperate for the promotion, so she fabricated a story to her boss, claiming she was pregnant by him because she knew he wouldn't let her keep the baby. To terminate the pregnancy, she negotiated for a promotion and a substantial sum of money to travel to another state for the procedure. By this point, I had serious doubts about whether she was being truthful, and it deeply hurt me to think she planned to deceive me until we got married. She, more than anyone, knew how protective I was of her well-being. She was aware that I would never agree to share her with anyone, yet she had cheated on me with her boss. One person here mentioned that I had asked her what she wanted, and when I did, she expressed a desire for us to go back to how we used to be. I explained to her that this was impossible because she had squandered her only opportunity, and no matter how much I loved her, we could never return to the way things were. Upon hearing this, she immediately stood up and created a scene. She began shouting at me, using harsh words, and claimed that she had been putting up with me for years, implying that I owed her. She argued that she had been doing me favors, and now it was her turn to receive something in return. Then she walked out on me. At this time, I was unaware that she had lost her job, and her boss had also been let go. She desperately wanted me to take her back, which explained why she was trying everything possible. Additionally, I recently found out that her best friend was aware of her affair, but chose to remain silent. They both conspired to deceive me and kept me in the dark. Just this evening, she called and announced her intention to visit tomorrow, insisting that we would not break up unless she permitted it. Her behavior is completely out of character, and it's quite unsettling. I warned her not to come or else I would involve the police. Update 2. So, as Taylor had promised, she came over. During our conversation, I formally ended our relationship, but her response was laughter. She claimed to have no regrets about cheating on me because she believed it was all for the sake of her career and saw no harm in it. This confirmed my suspicion that she would continue to be unfaithful even if we got married. I was furious, so I grabbed her arm in an attempt to escort her out of my apartment, but she forcefully pushed me, causing me to fall and injure my arm. To my shock, she then produced a massive hammer from her purse and began wreaking havoc in my home. She destroyed the television, my brand new laptop, and various other possessions. Fearing for my safety, I called the police to report the harassment. As she continued to rampage through my house, the police arrived, responding to a call from one of my neighbors who had overheard our argument and the loud crashes inside my home. Even my neighbor couldn't believe Taylor's behavior. In the end, the police stepped in and arrested Taylor. Due to my fall and the resulting injury to my left arm, I required medical treatment. After I recovered, I took legal action against Taylor for 2 main reasons: to recover the hospital expenses I had incurred and to hold her accountable for the damage she had caused to my apartment. When we appeared in court, the judge requested evidence such as pictures of the damages and my hospital bills, which added up to nearly $7,000. The cost was so high that I couldn't afford to replace everything. After hearing my side, the judge turned her attention to Taylor and posed some questions. In general, Taylor admitted to damaging items in my home and explained that she had broken my laptop and destroyed other things as her way of getting back at me for her job loss. The judge was quite angry and ruled against her. As I provide this update, Taylor has been ordered to replace my laptop, repair the appliances she damaged, and she has started reimbursing me for the hospital expenses. Now she understands that we can never reconcile, and this realization has left her in a state of misery. To make matters worse, she is unable to secure another job in our town due to being blacklisted. I find a sense of satisfaction in knowing that she is experiencing the consequences of her actions and receiving the justice she deserves.
All right, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in.
My husband, 38 male, and I, 37 female, have been married for quite some time and share a 5-year-old son. Throughout our marriage, we've faced consistent challenges, mostly stemming from his demanding work schedule. He's away for a minimum of 10 hours each day, 6 days a week, leaving me with the feeling that I'm essentially raising our child on my own. This has caused a lot of resentment and problems in our relationship. Whenever I've broached the topic of him working less, his response has been that he would if I were willing to shoulder more of the financial responsibility by taking on a higher-paying job instead of my current part-time position. There are circumstances that prevent me from pursuing full-time employment, which I won't delve into here. I'm sharing this background to offer a complete view of our marriage, rather than laying all the blame on me. Now let's talk about my part-time job. I work as a bookkeeper at the town library. My work hours are flexible, typically involving 3-hour shifts on weekdays while our son is at nursery. The pay is modest, but I appreciate the independence it provides me. Recently, we hired a new employee, a young and attractive man in his 20s. The librarian, who is a woman in her 40s and unmarried, along with the other female staff members, has shown a lot of interest in him because he's the only attractive man working in the library. However, he directed his attention toward me. I believe he noticed me from the very first day, and we began connecting through casual conversations and shared lunches in the break room. He made me feel wanted, feminine, and acknowledged, everything that my husband had ceased to make me feel. It was exhilarating, boosting my confidence, particularly given his youthful charm. In short, we soon embarked on an emotional and physical affair. I gradually increased my workdays and hours, leaving my son in nursery as I headed to the library. We spent time together whenever possible, and eventually began meeting outside of work because our interactions at the library were drawing attention. However, one day it all unraveled when my husband unexpectedly came to the library in search of me. He had never done that before, and I suspect he had a suspicion. That morning I had informed my husband that I would be heading to work early, but in reality I had gone to my coworker's place for an intimate encounter. I had no knowledge that my husband had come looking for me, and after our rendezvous, I collected my son and returned home as usual. In the evening, my husband returned home and inquired about my day at work. Unaware that he had visited my workplace, I launched into an absurd explanation. He patiently waited for me to finish and then calmly revealed that he had been at my workplace that day. A rush of negative emotions swept over me as I looked at him. I felt intense guilt and remorse for hurting him, imagining how devastated I would be if he had done the same with another woman. Overwhelmed, I broke down and confessed to my shameful affair. Initially, he remained composed, but soon his anger flared, and he resorted to name-calling and probing questions. I answered some of his inquiries, such as the reasons and duration of the affair, but found others inappropriate and uncomfortable to address. Amidst my tears, I expressed my willingness to work on our marriage and regain his trust, but he sat motionless. That night, I slept on the couch, feeling incredibly vulnerable. The following day, he expressed his desire for me to leave the house. He described me as repulsive and insisted that I should depart, allowing him and our child to be on their own. I moved out the next day, settling into my parents' basement. My parents were appalled by my actions, and I received harsh criticism from my mother-in-law, who used derogatory language to describe me. I am currently unsure of what steps to take. I miss my child, my home, and my husband deeply. All I truly desire is to return to my previous life. I don't hold him responsible for his emotions, and I never had any intention of causing him harm. Even though it may seem strange, the affair was something I felt I needed for myself. Nevertheless, I'm beginning to experience resentment once more. Based on what my mother-in-law mentioned, it appears he's contemplating ending our marriage, and it seems like both our families are supporting his decision. I'm uncertain about how I'll cope with a divorce. I anticipate that my coworkers won't be sympathetic when they learn about it, and I dread the public scrutiny. Edit. If you're inclined to engage in immature behavior, please abstain from commenting on posts where individuals are seeking relationship advice from mature adults. My ex-partner and I first met in high school, had our only daughter after college, and tied the knot a year later. Initially, everything was wonderful, but over time, our relationship grew stagnant. We faced a dead bedroom situation and coped with the typical challenges of a long-term marriage. Unfortunately, I made a selfish choice that set everything ablaze. I began an affair with a man from my gym. It all started with harmless flirting, which eventually led to him giving me his number. From there, it escalated to sexting, secret meetings, and eventually, a physical relationship. Things took a turn for the worse. I would invite him over when my husband was working late or claim I was at work while spending time at his place. About a year into the affair, my daughter graduated from college and moved back home. I can't recall exactly how she found out, but she confronted me about the possibility of me cheating on her father. At first I tried to lie, but my deception was failing. In the end, I concocted a false tale about my unhappiness, which wasn't entirely true, and explained that I loved both her father and my affair partner. And this was my way of finding happiness while allowing her father to be happy too. Surprisingly, my sob story worked, and she agreed to keep it a secret. Her only stipulation was that I couldn't bring him to our home, so I continued to meet with him at his place. One day, while I was asleep, my ex-partner went through my phone and discovered everything. all my conversations and pictures with my former affair partner, XAP. He also stumbled upon the conversation where I mentioned that my daughter was aware of the secret. This led him to read the texts with my daughter, where she expressed her desire for my happiness. In the following week, I noticed a change in his behavior. He barely engaged with my daughter and me, responding with monotonous yeses, nos, or I don't cares. This situation deeply affected my daughter, as they had always been close, and she began to worry that he had found out about the affair. Then, one day, while my daughter and I were watching TV, he arrived home, placed some papers in front of me, and calmly stated that he wanted a divorce. He revealed that he was aware of my affair and even mentioned the name of my former affair partner, AP. I asked our daughter to leave the room, but he insisted that she should stay, reminding us that she wanted me to be happy. My daughter and I were both devastated and begged him for forgiveness. He yelled that he wanted a divorce and urged me to sign the papers quickly so he could exit our lives, as he believed I obviously didn't love him and that he obviously wasn't a good enough father for our daughter to be involved in such a situation. Then he left. The divorce process lasted around 9 months. I repeatedly pleaded with him to consider reconciliation, or at the very least to forgive our daughter. However, he remained steadfast in his decision to have no involvement with us. Since then, neither my daughter nor I have had any contact with or seen him. She has attempted to reach out through texts and calls, but he consistently ignores her. Our relationship has also suffered greatly during this time. She went through a severe bout of depression, and we've had some explosive arguments. She has expressed regret over covering for me, saying she should have informed her dad as soon as she found out. She's used harsh words, calling me every name in the book and deeming me the worst mother ever, believing that I've ruined her life. I ended up with the house, as it had belonged to my parents previously. She moved out to live with her friends and only communicates with me when she needs something, visiting solely for quick item retrievals. I've shattered everything, and now I have no one. It's been 3 years, and I deeply miss my ex, but there are 2 significant obstacles. He despises me, and he's remarried with an adopted baby, making reconciliation highly unlikely. To the best of my knowledge, he still doesn't communicate with our daughter. Is there anything I can say to him to facilitate contact with her? Is there any way to mend my fractured relationship with my daughter? Or is everything irreparably damaged? I'm utterly lost.